Welcome, Dr. Omar. Thank you so much for giving a second hour of your time so that we can get this recording from you properly. Unlike what happened last time, I'm not going to say anything more. I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you to Brescia House for this absolutely amazing opportunity, and to yourself, Liz Norman, who's been a strong and ongoing patron of the Teddy Bear Foundation for Abused Children. So today we're focusing on the nature of the online predator and, of course, how to protect our children. If we just look at the past year and look at the central platform that online communication has been awarded, and how children's play, support, learning has all become central to online. And of course, with that comes many risks, certainly many opportunities, but also many risks, and also the potential for allowing the opportunity for many online predators to prey on innocent children who are victims to this kind of violation. So what I'm going to be focusing on basically is to look at the implications of online engagement, the negative effects on mental health, of course, the incidence and prevalence of increased cases where victims have fallen prey to the digital platform, and is the digital platform failing to protect children, and the reality that law enforcement agencies are struggling on the ground, that we are finding that the reporting mechanisms are not in place, and where reports are made, they're not followed through. And what can parents do to protect their children from online sexual predators? Because this is something that we are currently faced with, where more and more children and more parents are coming forward and requesting support and intervention because they're at a total loss and quite fearful and anxious about the way forward. So also looking out for the warning signs of abuse, and just so what can we do? And of course, setting rules by example. So I think that's just in a nutshell of what I'll be focusing on. But I think what we need to look at is that the internet has unfortunately made it very easy for sexual predators to gain access to the lives of children. Yes, we've been fortunate in having access to the internet for acquiring knowledge, skills, and making the world an oyster where in one split second one can acquire so much information. So on the upside, that is something that we value. But on the downside, so many children are making more and more virtual connections, and we're experiencing the crimes of sextortion and online abuse ongoing, frequently, and it seems to be more and more a regular feature. So we know that many children who have come forward have been coerced into sending explicit pictures of themselves or facing other forms of online sexual solicitation and exploitation. And this unfortunately results in children feeling quite powerless, helpless, and only realizing after the actual commitment or engagement that they've fallen prey to this. So I think this is an ongoing concern for many of children and families. And I think these are things that we have to be aware of, the nature of social media sites, given that not all the sites are healthy environments for children and adolescents. So I think this is something that obviously we are all new to. We are living in the fourth industrial revolution. And if we just look at the average time a child spends online, we know that a child is supposed to be sleeping or a person sleeps for 8 hours, but spends 10 waking hours with self, so with family and friends, and 4 hours with mass media, and only 2 hours in school. And if we just look at this year, it's certainly been a learning curve where so much more than those 4 hours are spent online. And we find that more energy on media and engagement with the internet has been the norm. We need to also be aware that how is the brain wired? So the brain is wired that when we write, we are using or tapping into both sides of the brain. But when we type, it's interesting that we're only tapping into the left side of the brain, which of course enhances the creativity, learning, and of course increased opportunities for growth and development. So these are just the neurological functions and operations of the different modes of interaction and engagement with online and media. And I think what we've seen and we've heard, the other speakers speak to how it impacts on the performance at school, the lower grades, poor health and symptoms. And I think if we look at all the desktop literature, the global literature, there's empirical evidence supporting potential mental health problems. And this is something that as parents, as caregivers, as significant others, we need to be aware of, that there needs to be a balance. We cannot deprive children of this opportunity, but at the same time, we need to monitor how they juggle and manage this engagement online. I think the other thing is that 22% of our adolescents, our teenagers, log onto their favorite sites more than 10 times a day. And that seems to be the ongoing response. And of course, it's also an acceptable social norm where people are now more and more online than offline. And this is something that we have to be aware of, that this is part of this generation's social and emotional development, that their growth and development is occurring while they're on the internet and on their smart devices, whatever it may be. So children, I think the implications, what are the implications there? That parents need to actually be aware of their children's online activities. I know this is a difficult task. It may be a very challenging task because parents have multiple responsibilities. They have day jobs, night jobs, parenting, other social responsibilities, and it's difficult to monitor the use, their children's online use of Facebook and all other social media platforms. But I think we need to also be aware that the way we look at technology, for children, it's just like breathing air. I mean, every second, every breath they take, they actually very savvy with technology. They find a lot of satisfaction and pleasure with technology. It's not just a tool to them. They eat with it, they sleep with it, they wake up with it, and it's actually part of their world. It's part of their intrinsic and extrinsic world. So the social, the Facebook, the Twitter, the Messenger, Snapchats, all of that have actually become an inescapable facet of children's lives. And we need to realize that it's inherent not only in their physical, physiological, psychological, but it's also becoming part of the makeup of their genetic component as well. Now, I'd like to focus on the negative effects of online engagement and mental health, and to see what does it actually do? Does it have an effect? Does it impact on the well-being of children? And why would it impact if they're acquiring knowledge and skills and completing assignments and of course doing online learning? Should it affect their mental health? So I think we need to just be clear on that, depending on how much time they're spending, what are they spending their time on when they're online, what is the content and the composition and engagement, what does it actually what does it include, and who does it include? So I think these are key questions to ask, because as we said, that media can certainly be, being on the internet can be an absolute friend. It could be, the best educator, teacher, and opportunities for growing and developing. But at the same time, when there are potential predators waiting online to lure children, this could certainly result in them being victimized, and it could certainly be that this so-called friend or misused friend or misrepresented friend could be a foe, not actually a friend. And I think we as parents, I'm a grandparent, I think it's impossible to prevent children from getting access to technology. It would also be unfair to prevent children from gaining access to technology. We need to be aware of what is out there, who our children are communicating with, what are they communicating about, but also to ensure that safety measures, protective mechanisms are put in place. Because often, I think the greatest fear out there, and myself, having been a parent and now a grandparent, it's not being savvy, technology savvy, and thinking that, but I don't know what to do. How do we do it? Oh, it's always fear of the unknown. And that's what actually holds us back and prevents us from ensuring that we are in a position we can assist, and where we can assist and support our children, instead of sitting on the fence and fearing and letting the anxieties escalate. So I think we need to be aware that in many cases, online solicitation leads to offline exploitation or abuse. We've seen that even at the clinic. We've seen so many case studies where, unbeknown to children, unbeknown to parents, children are communicating with so-called friends, online. And these predators look out for children who are needy, who are vulnerable, who obviously want approval, affection, validation. And as a parent, let's just ask the question, how much time do we actually have in a day to sit and validate, acknowledge our child? How much time do we have to nurture and stroke that child? I think our demands are so excessive that it makes it often difficult to actually focus, solely on the child, give undivided attention. Whereas these online predators are masters at this. What do? They actually stroke the fragile egos of our children, the unmet emotional needs, the child that is needy of validation or needs that kind of extra nurturing, stroking, and children who have low self-esteem or low sense of self-worth. So these are things that we need to be aware of, that whilst we are not in a position always to be emotionally and physically available, our online predators are always available. They are easily available, accessible, and certainly reaching out to our many children who are not aware of who they actually working with. And I think just looking at the online predators, so who is an online predator? What does he or she do? How do they operate? It's often an adult pretending to be a child, befriending the child through online chat rooms, your social networking websites, email, the mobile telephone messaging, gaining their trust, stalking their online activities. So, children are not even aware. They would even, form relationships, show so much interest in their child. The online predator is showing an overly, interest in the child's activities, in the child's performance at school, in the child's engagement with other children, in the child's appearance, and of course, approving, acknowledging, commending, flattering the child, complimenting the child. And this is something that anybody out there would value and would certainly appreciate. So this child is, a relationship is formed with the child. You know, the child doesn't realize slowly the grooming process begins, where the boundaries are slowly broken or eroded, where they start, you know, asking the child about his activities, his games, his interests, his participation in daily functions. And then they start participating in non-contact sexual activities without the child realizing, where they start, you know, focusing on the appearance of the child, and then a little bit more invasive, a little bit more intrusive, such as engaging in sexual conversations, either online or via the mobile telephone. And this is what we have seen cases, and we've dealt with children who have been subjected to this kind of online grooming. And as I mentioned, slowly boundary violations, where the child doesn't realize that the alleged or the online predator, this is the motive or modus operandi, where they would then slowly ask the child to, not only just to start off with sharing, their photographs, and then it becomes more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and share indecent images of themselves online, or through the mobile phone. So the child does, it becomes difficult for children to say no, because of the special or preferential treatment that the child has been given. The child, in the child's mind, or the adolescent, but nobody else cares about me. Nobody else shows so much interest in who I am, what I'm made of, and this person is. And so, of course, it's going to become harder for the child not to share those images or not to share the information. They would feel that they don't want to lose this relationship, and they would feel guilty that if they didn't share this, this person is going to go away or not be made, will no longer be available. So I think this is how we also see the distribution of child porn, where the images start going slowly, bit by bit, a little bit more, and then, of course, everything is out in the open. And if the child smells that something is wrong, then of course, what do we find? The emotional blackmail, the ransom, the sextorting, where threats are made of images going viral. We've seen at our clinic a 16-year-old who shared all the images and then felt exposed, humiliated, and ashamed. And because of the sextorting, eventually resorted to self-mutilation and suicide. So those are some of the long-term implications that we alert parents to and children to. Now, I want to focus on the characteristics of sexual predators, because often the question asked is, can you actually identify a sexual predator? Can one actually compartmentalize them? And then, of course, it's not like people have horns on their heads, or, there's certain outstanding features, physical features, that you can just take one look at that individual and say, well, hey, that's an online predator. However, there are certain things or traits that we can look out for. Somebody that has a lot of time, somebody maybe that's unemployed, has a basic educational background, and shows a lot of romantic involvement or engagement with the child, much more compared to offline predators, and does not have any emotional identification with children. So this person, in essence, does not actually have empathy. And we would find that it could be males, it could be females. So it's not a specific gender, but also I think when we talk about basic educational background, I want to clarify that it could be somebody that has a sophisticated educational background. So it's actually very difficult to compartmentalize, but just to look out for people that spend a lot of time online and engaging with children. So these are characteristics that we need to be aware of. I think that's something that is always difficult when we talk about characteristics of sexual predators. Now, looking at the digital platform, and is the digital platform failing to protect our children? According to the court reports, looking at court records, police reports, and even numerous research, it is evident that cases of abuse are emerging more frequently around the world. So this is a global concern, a global problem. It's not just specific to South Africa. It's growing in South Africa, certainly more so with the advent of technology and the access to technology. But we know from from research that has been conducted at the University of South Africa, at the Bureau of Market Research, Professor Antoinette Basson and others have found that grooming thousands of victims is actually becoming an online thing, more and more common, and gaming and social platforms are the most common hunting grounds for these predators. So they actually lurk around the gaming platforms and other social platforms. And I think this is the response to this problem by the tech industry actually has not been sufficient. Although these companies are aware of the increase in child sexual abuse on the internet, safeguards that we have are not sufficient and obviously not enough to protect our children. And the companies, the tech companies that are out there are not held legally responsible for the content that is shared or posted on their website. So this is another loophole or a disadvantage that we are faced with. So I want to ask one question. Why are law enforcement agencies, people like SAPS, struggling? I think according to a study by UNICEF, the major risks that children face on the internet, and this is something that we're seeing in every setting, whether it's in an educational setting, a recreational setting, in the community, in families, what we are seeing is the cyberbullying, which has certainly taken on an increased platform, online sexual abuse or exploitation, online, enforcement of forcing victims to commit illicit behaviors, grooming, which I've already spoken to. And of course, parents need to know about the types of people their children may encounter on the internet. So I think what we need to be aware of is that what we are seeing is that with the grooming, there's exchange of, sharing of pornography, so the child sex abuse images, and the ultimate, the devastation is that we've also seen child trafficking emerging on this platform, where children are more and more at greater risk and vulnerable because they're identifying particulars of where they live, who they live with, the geographic location, all sorts of information, the school that they're attending, and how many people live in the house. I think these are the kind of risks that children are exposed to once they're online and, of course, become prey to the predators online. So how can parents protect their children from the online sexual predators?
Shaheda, we've lost your signal. Can you hear me? Your sound just disappeared.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I think let's do what Kevin suggested, and we'll go back. You had just started saying, what can we do about online predators? So if you start again there, but we can't just for a few minutes give a gap and then start.
All right, so just tell me when to start again.
Okay, you can start when you're ready.
I'm ready, okay. So my question is, what can parents do to protect their children from the online sexual predator? And I know it's been reiterated and repeated so many times, but I think we still need to emphasize that parents have to set clear rules regarding the people their child is allowed to interact with online. I think that's just imperative. Parents also, or caregivers, need to spend time exploring the games, apps, and social media platforms that their child is using. They need to learn about the safety features these platforms provide. So trying to acquire this skill of ensuring that their child is protected is essential. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have. And there are online opportunities where parents can actually online learn about these preventative or protective mechanisms that they can install and implement and also monitor their children. So it's important that parents identify potential risks and inform their children in a non-confrontational conversation. So I think this is critical. I had a mother calling me day before yesterday where she said her 9-year-old, she discovered on his cell phone, the couple are divorced and the father's given a new phone to the 9-year-old, and she discovered that he had opened porn sites a few times. And of course, the distress and the alarm, one cannot begin to even comprehend. And her concerns around that, what does she do about it? And I said to her that I told her, don't be discouraged, don't be alarmed by this, because if we just look at the South African context, we know that children between the ages, 94% of children between the ages of 11 and 14 years have already opened porn sites. But the important thing here is that parents need to actually dialogue and communicate with their children. And what we say to parents is, please breathe. So we say to them to make a concerted effort to actually breathe, because breathing relaxes the brain, and then speak to your child, not confronting, but saying that, I'm not sure if you've ever opened a porn site or what a porn site is about. Have you heard about it? Or where have you heard? But maybe if you haven't, or if you're not willing to tell me, I would like to speak to you about it. So it's about opening that dialogue, opening that conversation with the child, not confronting, because if you push against the grain, they're going to obviously push harder. So there's going to be resistance. So we don't go against the grain, we go with the grain. So it's not being punitive, or it's not being, chastising the child, or saying to the child, you've done wrong, or you've done bad, or that's ugly. But you're actually giving permission to the child that, you know what, you can say anything to me. I'm your parent. I'm here to assist you, guide you, love you, support you, educate you, and inform you. But at the same time, your safety is of most importance. So that is what we say when we say non-confrontational. Make sure that your child, understands what it means to be online, and what are the benefits, what are the risks, but also be aware of the kind of conversations that they have. So reminding them that people they think they're having a conversation may not be the person, because they need to be aware that pictures are exchanged, photos are exchanged, and it's not always representative of who they are. So I think, it's all about setting ground rules, but being consistent, communicating, and clarifying. So, the 3 C's that we speak to, it's about ensuring that this is done, not a once-off, but regularly and engaging daily. So making sure that your child knows that you are there not only to guide and protect them, but you are there to monitor them, that there are rights and there are responsibilities. And as a parent, it is your responsibility to protect your child. And I think, just looking at some rules for your smartphone, like telling a parent if someone is making you feel uncomfortable. So having that kind of conversation with the child, reminding them that think before you act or before you send any information or picture of yourself. Don't just send it, think about it. Ask before you actually downloading a new app. Why are you downloading it? Do you know what it's about? And then don't post your number online or give it to strangers. Don't answer a call from an unknown number. I mean, these are basic things, but one needs to reinforce this knowledge. Follow school rules about smartphones in classroom campuses, and find opportunities to set an example of proper mobile usage. So you need to also role model. We need to role model as parents, grandparents, significant others. We must practice what we preach as well. And I think we need to also make children aware that, they can make mistakes. And if they make a mistake, they shouldn't blame themselves or withhold that, but they need to come forward and seek support from their parents. And that's what that non-confrontational dialogue is about. It's giving them permission. Should anything go awry, should anything, result in something that you do not feel comfortable with, the most important thing is that they could reach out at the press of a button to their parents, because this is what your groomers or your online predators work on, because of children's fears, children's anxieties, the humiliation, the shame, the embarrassment, the stigma, that they would be judged and they would be blamed for what has happened. So I think this is something that parents need to, reassure their children about, and discuss regularly with their children, and actually to talk about sex and sexuality and the risks of engaging with people we actually don't know, because online and offline is actually a different scenario, and this is what children need to be reminded of. And I think that is a reality that we are faced with, and it's going to be an ongoing reality. So some of the risks that we've seen is your cyberbullying, online harassment, sexting, your sextorting, which I told about, the blackmail. And I want to just share with you, I think, 2 case studies. So we had 2 cousins aged 12 and 13, and they, on a Saturday night, they were busy talking to somebody online. It was so exciting. It is always exciting. And this is what we need to remind children, the thrill of speaking to somebody we don't know, and they present themselves as somebody beautiful, handsome, and exciting. It makes it very hard to resist to engage online. So these were the typical 2 girls, 12 and 13-year-old, giggling and communicating with somebody online. They saw these photos, which they found to be so attractive, and they were invited to meet at a certain spot on a Saturday night. So what did these 2 girls do? The 2 cousins, they snuck out at night and went out and met where they were supposed to meet. And as the old story goes, there was an older person there saying that the 2 boys are waiting. You'll have to come accompany me in the car, and then you will be meeting them at the spot that was arranged for them to meet. Unfortunately, we know that didn't happen. These two girls were raped, repeatedly raped by adults, by two male adults, and they did not do anything about it. They were dropped off. They were afraid to say anything. However, 2 weeks later, I got a call from their aunt who knows the Teddy Bear Foundation, and then they were referred for a medical examination, and they couldn't be put on antiretrovirals because the 72-hour critical period had already gone regarding the potential for HIV transmission. However, a pregnancy test was done, a sexually transmitted infection test was done, and these girls were very traumatized. But the act of betrayal, the trust, the deceit was something that they couldn't come to terms with, but they also felt that they had betrayed their families, and they had, obviously misled their families, and felt very guilty about that. So I just want to bring that to the fore, that this is a harsh reality. It does happen. It's not in the movies. It's not out there as stories, but this is evidence on the ground. And then we've had girls also at the clinic who were lured to come in for photo shoots, and coming from disadvantaged communities, wanting extra money, wanting opportunities for, your clothes and cell phone and all of that. They, willingly availed themselves for modeling opportunities. However, children, they were invited to meet at a certain spot, and then were offered to be transported to another venue. And one of the girls actually felt that this was not right. She was a little bit more astute and reported this. And what actually transpired was that a whole child trafficking ring was intercepted, that this is how they work. This is the modus operandi. So I just thought it's important to illustrate the realities on the ground of what actually happens to victims, how they get lured unbeknown to themselves. And I think basically I want to just urge parents that, it is difficult to relate to the digital platforms, to become savvy, but it is necessary. And it's integral to the well-being and protection of children's lives. And of course, parents, we need to actually reach out. We can't simply assume that we can trust our children in what they're doing, because we actually cannot turn our eyes in the other direction. I think parents need to assess their children's online activities. Parents need to pay attention to the online trends and the latest technologies, websites, and applications children are using. I think we need to be aware that most children, do we let children cook in the kitchen or drive without first teaching them? So children need to know about the realities, the risks, the dangers, and the implications of connecting with online persons unbeknown to them. And one mustn't assume that children know everything. I think that is something we take for granted. Oh, children know everything. So it is important that we engage with children all the time. And I'm harping on that because communication is key. We need to talk to our children, or rather, the more important thing is, as Professor Rosen says, we need to listen to them. It's that deep, active listening. I quote Professor Rosen. He says, talk 1 minute and listen for 5, close quote. And I think that is so powerful. Talk for 1 minute and listen for 5. That's often where our challenges lie. Younger children may try to lie about their age to get onto sites like Facebook that have strict age limits, But parents should not condone this. Even if you think your child is bright as a button or your child is emotionally and intellectually advanced for his or her years, I think we need to adhere to the regulations and requirements. I think if we teach and allow younger children on these sites, we're actually giving them permission to be violated and placing them at risk and danger. In concluding, I want to just say one thing, that parents, we need to remember that these are children, and children require support, guidance, direction, love, but also routine and limit setting, something that we sometimes feel is not necessary. Setting limits and ground rules are essential in their growth and development and their protection. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Omar, for your knowledge, for your experience, and for everything you do at the Teddy Bear Clinic. I'm hoping that whoever listens to this really appreciate the time and effort that you and your team spend every day trying to keep the children of our country safe. And so I'm hoping that people also look up the Teddy Bear Foundation and contribute in some way to help support you in all the good that you do. So thank you very, very much